Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm going to give us about a minute to let people file in and we'll get started. Okay, we have a lot of content to cover and not very much time, so we're going to jump right in. Welcome and thank you all for joining our webinar today titled How to Make Your Health Benefits Ecosystem Work as One. I'm Paul Richmond, the Chief Commercial Officer for Wellnessity, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we dive in, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We're going to be together, as I said, for about 30 minutes, so please feel free to drop questions into the chat at any time. We'll monitor those, and we'll save a few minutes at the end if possible to go through those. This is a topic that the entire panel is very passionate about. It's a kind of conversation that could go on for hours, I know, because we've left probably 2 hours worth of content on the editing floor as we were preparing for this. So we're going to focus today on the most practical pieces that we can provide for you to take back and use right away to make your ecosystem work better. You know, we all know the problem. We all know why we're here. The cost of delivering employer-sponsored healthcare for members has outpaced inflation for the last 20 years, and the gap's continuing to widen, and it's not looking any better. So for that reason, HR and finance leaders are under growing pressure to prove the ROI of the solutions they bring in to ensure every vendor relationship is delivering measurable value. And that's what today's session is about. Seeing what good coordination looks like, walking away with some concrete ideas you can use in the first quarter to tighten up alignment and improve results. See if I can advance the slide. Okay, sorry about that. We've got a great panel with 3 different perspectives. I'm really excited to have this conversation. We have Dave representing the buyer side. We have Tanya representing the vendor. And of course, the platform side is going to be represented by Aditya. So I'm going to let each of them give a brief introduction and tell you all a little bit about what makes their company differentiated in the space. Dave, start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Zig. I lead clinical services for Alliant. We are consultants and brokers. We help employers achieve more value in what they build and pay for across their employee benefits ecosystems, and then provide continuous insight on performance through data analytics. Tanya?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Stark. I am the Senior Vice President of Product Innovation for CirrusMD. As a company, we deliver instant chat first access to virtual primary care. And this, the way that we do this is enabled continuous conversations. We don't have waiting rooms. And this makes it easier for employees to actually use the care and employers to see measurable coordinated impact across their point solutions.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Hey, all. I'm Aditya Kishore. I'm the head of customer success here at Wellnessity. We're the health plan operating platform that can consolidate medical claims, pharmacy claims, and vendor feeds into a comprehensive output that's unified via common ID and can prove ROI. This helps HR leaders coordinate the vendor ecosystem and, most importantly, prove results.
Excellent. So as we lay out the problem, we talk about the need to prove ROI, the need to prove the results of vendor ecosystems. Whenever we send out the registration, we ask everybody for some insight into the biggest challenges that are facing you as customers. We highlighted vendors operating in silos, as you can see on our slide. 82% of employers say that they cannot validate ROI claims, according to a National Business Group on Health survey. And then we have only 28% of employers saying they trust the ROI reports provided by their vendors, according to Willis Towers Watson report. So those things obviously create problems. But when we asked you in registration, we heard 2 things. Nearly half of you flagged the lack of alignment among vendors as a top issue, and over a third called out data accuracy and timeliness and limited visibility into outcomes, and of course, the manual and inconsistent nature of the reporting. So that's exactly the problem space we're looking to talk about today and to tackle. How do we get your ecosystem working as one instead of being siloed across a bunch of different data sets and misaligned vendors with manual reporting? So Dave, I want to start with you. What are you hearing from your customers?
Thanks, Paul. The number one concern I hear is just trend is unsustainable. I mean, the cost of care continues to go up, and employers want to understand their true costs and what's driving their spend, and whether or not their point solutions are actually working. So they're skeptical of vendor ROI reports. They often don't hold much stock, especially with the CFO. They want real utilization and engagement data. And if they don't already have it with their vendors, they're pushing for utilization-based pricing, paying for what employees actually use, not just access on a PEPM basis. And they want vendors integrating their efforts rather than continuing to operate in silos.
Tanya, from the vendor side, what are some of the things that get in the way of proving the real impact that you're having?
Yeah, I would say we see like pretty significant gaps in measurement along the entire kind of patient engagement cycle. And because of those gaps and the resulting complexity in measuring ROI, it becomes really difficult for employers to see what's truly driving value. And, rightfully so, employers are asking, what can I consolidate or simplify? Looking at it from my experience here at CRSMD, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how to define and measure true meaningful engagement, what's, actually truly meaningful. And because we often serve as that clinical front door, we're able to refer members back into the benefit ecosystem. The hard part is being able to track that full cycle or full circle of engagement. So while we may be the starting point, without visibility across that entire journey, it's really difficult to assign credit or validate the ROI.
Yeah, and we're seeing that with our employers too, right? They're asking for us to be able to, and they're asking for vendors to be able to report out on not just their activity, but the engagement outcomes of what happens after that, right? Because as you refer people out, they want to know how successful those efforts were.
100%. We definitely have clients asking, like, we love that you're able to make these referrals out of primary care, but like, how many how many did you send to vendor X, and did they follow through? And that second part is really the critical piece. Yeah, we show half of that story, but confirming what happens next is still pretty difficult when someone leaves our platform. Ideally, we'd be able to close the loop. Yes, this member was referred, they were seen, they completed their care, and with a value of X. That's the visibility I think that we're all looking for.
And that's where the platform layer comes in. Our clients are basically looking to answer two key questions. What's the actual engagement from each vendor? Who are they reaching out to and how? And what's the utilization that follows? Right? If you can't connect those consistently, you can't really validate impact or close the gaps like Tanya just described. That's why the first step isn't really a measurement of metrics, but rather an alignment on data. A shared data layout that defines engagement and utilization in a consistent, clear way across these vendors turns those fragmented inputs into something more measurable and credible.
Yeah, so let's flip it a little bit. If fragmentation is the problem, what does good coordination look like in practice? Aditya, let's start with you.
Yeah, the foundation is data readiness. It starts with the core feeds, eligibility, but then going back to the earlier page, the engagement, the utilization data, so you can see who's in the population, how they're interacting, and how they're moving through the care journey. The way you do this, the way you track this is via a single member ID. And having this IDs across all vendors is essential because without it, you can't really track journey or compare performance. And then, of course, you want a strong QA framework, right? Clear field mapping, reject rules, simple error monitoring, just making sure the data is clean and usable. And then the SLAs, meaning same day or real-time ingestion of these priority events, ensures you're not waiting for quarterly updates to know what's happening. The last thing you want is, for example, an eligibility file coming in late or some errors coming in the data, and you're not able to cache that until it's too late or it's well along in the care journey. You kind of lose sight of the member itself.
Tanya, from your perspective, what's the minimum data and cadence required to steer a member at the moment of need or the moment of decision for them?
Yeah. So to steer at the moment of decision requires us to be able to set up the plan correctly from the start. So this means you starting in implementation. The data that we need in implementation is basically a benefits guide and an SPD, summary plan description. This allows us to know who's aligned to which plan and the clinical benefits that then they're eligible for. Um, for example, like the way that our platform works, if somebody comes in presenting back pain to one of our physicians, we can route them to the MSK program immediately in that moment of need. That only happens because we have all of that information already preloaded for our physicians to see when the need arises during a clinical visit. I'd also say in that moment of need, when the patient is most likely to take action on that referral, right? So they're actually what we call activated. We have that right information at our fingertips. Then, if we make that a referral, obviously having set up a common ID, once we make that referral out, that should travel with the patient as well. But from our seat on the bus in primary care, we just need to have the right setup in the front and have that common information available then.
So, what are some common pitfalls in the fix that you have identified that increases the speed of the data without sacrificing quality?
It's a tough question. I'll answer, I guess, with a real example that kind of highlights a common pitfall. So we have a large Fortune 50 client, and in their own ecosystem, we make referrals to one vendor above and beyond the rest of the vendors. And in that particular vendor, their reporting actually validates, yes, we are their number one source of referrals. The end. The end. What we're missing again is that common ID that shows, yes, the referral was made for this condition. And here was the outcome. So, we have a visibility today at the aggregate level, but what we're missing is that member level specificity needed to track outcomes and value person by person. So that's kind of shows like an illustrative example in real life today, what we struggle with. And then, of course, another common pitfall I would say is the custom one-offs. Lack of data standardization is also part of the problem. But if you can fix all that with a common data model or a common data framework.
Okay, let's pivot a little bit to the platform side and bring in Aditya. How does a common data model reduce custom work and speed up new vendor integrations?
Yeah, so it's all about efficiency, but also flexibility, right? A shared data model that is standardized, same fields, cadence, SLAs, but also one that's flexible. There'll always be some vendor-specific needs when providing this data. For example, if a second opinion program downgrades a care recommendation, we want to be able to capture that. But the key point is that these integrations shouldn't turn into long, drawn-out implementation projects. They should function more like simple plugins. You can reuse the mapping, shorten the QA, so you can get to the outcomes and insights faster.
Okay, David, as a buyer or someone that's advising buyers, what are some of the things that belong on like a quarterly vendor scorecard or the way that you're measuring these successful integrations?
Sure. Yeah. Well, three buckets really when we're looking at scorecards: so targets, thresholds, and leading indicators. And regarding targets, this just says what success looks like, right? So utilization and engagement are kind of core, but we also need to be looking at sustainment. So are members actually completing the planned treatment? Vendors need to be using consistent definitions around this. So engagement isn't just clicks, it's actually meaningful activity that is completed. And disease impact, performance metrics, and I really like patient-reported outcome metrics using a tool like Promise 10, which is validated for MSK, musculoskeletal. And then PHQ-9, GAD-7 improvements in behavioral health, for example. And then for other solutions like high cost of care avoidance or high quality of care utilization. Regarding thresholds, these are just alert levels for misses as we have our experience with these vendors. So low member reach, latency in service, incomplete data fields, those kinds of things. And then we also look at leading indicators, so actions that predict future results based on best evidence. So outreach and referral acceptance, program starts, care plan completion, that sort of thing. So really important to track those three buckets.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that common ID really is the enabler that makes all of this stuff work better together, provides full transparency across the engagement cycle, and provides the ability to view each member with all those indicators that they've just mentioned.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess I would just add, that common ID really does kind of also help cut through kind of the competing priorities and internal politics around vendor relationships. I would also say clear alignment that your consultants like Dave can help employers get to. But yeah, at that point, it becomes much easier to kind of cut through those internal politics or kind of vendor competitions to kind of prove ROI or own the front door. And then you have this kind of true golden record that you can actually use to follow a member through that entire engagement cycle, seeing what clinical improvements occurred and bringing really true transparency to outcomes.
Right, Tanya. So the vendors all want to take credit for success, right? And so really being aligned on interests and expectations is really important across the vendors. And I've been at this, 20 plus years, and we all remember the vendor summits, right? Everybody gets together, we talk a good game, and then everybody goes off into their silos, right? And that's just the way the world works historically.
Yeah, I've been a part of several of those, David. I can definitely relate. We talk a good game. So let's bring this to life a little bit. I want to just real briefly go through each one of you and identify where we have some success stories showing the value of integration and how that can change results. Dave, let's start with you.
Sure. So example that comes to mind is a client where we centered an employer's their strategy on advanced primary care as the hub. It's a great hub. It's a great place to steer. And we created shared efforts and incentives for coordinated routing. We saw effective integration, not just with the employer's point solutions and their ecosystem, but community resources as well, including the hospital. And with primary care functioning as it should, this is in contrast to community primary care, most of the point solutions actually eventually weren't needed. Costs dropped, outcomes improved, and the ROI stood up to audit.
That's outstanding. Tanya, how about you?
Yeah, by the way, completely echo David's sentiments about effective primary care. In our case, we piloted, excuse me, an AI-assisted referral visibility system. So physicians could see benefit options inside their workflow real time for the patient. When we did that, engagement with the resources on the provider side spiked 230%. So they were looking at those resources quite a lot more. And then they use those resources about 40% in the referrals. And the reason is not every time, that information is surfaced, it makes sense to include that in a care plan. And so we give our physicians the ability to determine whether or not it's care plan supportive or makes sense, it's salient. This is example of like a human in the loop, right? Being that kind of QA. When the AI surfaced these options, our clinicians really did make the final call.
That sounds like a good opportunity for another webinar, AI in healthcare, right? Aditya.
Yeah, so one client of ours cut data lag from 60 days to just 2 by aligning around that shared model, the common ID, the consistent cadence, and real-time SLAs. So using that playbook, they saw a 12 to 15% reduction in high-cost categories within 6 months, and actually ended up saving approximately $33,000 per member annually by avoiding these high acuity episodes.
That's outstanding. So I mentioned we wanted to give people something that is actionable that they could take away and improve their ecosystem right away. Dave, let's start with you. When you walk into a new client environment, what are some of the first things you're looking to check? What are the signals that the ecosystem is ready for integration?
Well, first, you just want to look to see if integration even exists. Chances are probably doesn't, but review your reports. If vendors aren't referencing shared IDs, which is a common theme here today, and have shared data or have aligned interests, right, or metrics, you're not integrated, no matter how many dashboards you might have across your ecosystem.
Exactly right, Dave. And the way you do that is that you need to define your common data elements: member ID, start dates, end dates, event type, and just being able to make sure your platform can adjust data same day. The latency just kills the momentum.
Okay, so if they're not ready to integrate yet, what's the fastest way to get baseline readiness? Like, what's the first 30 days look like? Dave?
Well, start by mapping your ecosystem. I mean, it lists every vendor, their data feeds, cadence of updates that you get. That just creating this simple inventory becomes your source of truth to begin strategy. And then set a goal. Again, one shared ID would be ideal, one monthly integration cadence, and one owner for data flow. That's important.
Okay, so open question to the panel. Once you're kicked off, what keeps this infrastructure up? What keeps this from collapsing back into silos? What's the cadence of meeting and communication, data sharing, or the structure that makes ongoing collaboration possible?
I can start. So establish a QBR rhythm. I think, having every quarter, having the vendors present performance using the same scorecard and metrics. One, it helps create peer accountability, but also it mainly encourages collaboration. It shows the client leadership that yes, this ecosystem works, and that these results, especially the good results, are repeatable.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would just echo a lot of what you just said, establishing that QBR rhythm, but, I would even say run monthly syncs with the vendors, particularly early on, to, make sure that the data quality is there. And also align your communications, especially again early on, keeping those feedbacks loops open, transparent, and that way, if something's going wrong, course corrections happen before they snowball.
Okay, Tanya, to that point, what are some of the things that you wish every employer or every consultant would do prior to a launch to make sure that you're able to be set up for success faster?
Yeah, we go back to one of the earlier points, and you can't emphasize it enough, which is really before launch, get aligned. Aligned on before we even get to the data fields, like who is doing what, who's responsible for what. And then that alignment will start to show up in how you think about aligning your data fields, your test feeds, get those done early, plan your communication sequencing, but all of that alignment up front really drives the rest. And then again, after the launch, those QBRs are non-negotiable. And again, early on, even monthly, because, the old saying of what gets measured gets managed is pretty true.
Okay, so that's the roadmap, right? It's get alignment from the start, but create visibility, create that rhythm of communication, and also that culture of accountability within the ecosystem so that you take that, what was formerly a fragmented vendor ecosystem, and make it actually perform together as one unit. Okay, we don't have much time left, so I want to run through real quickly. What are some key takeaways that you would you'd have our audience take away so that they could be most successful in creating momentum towards this effort in Q1? Dave?
Well, I'm going to echo a little bit what Tanya said. Just tightening up the governance, clarify ownership, and clearly define roles. That's the only way you're going to drive everything we've discussed today. That'd be number one.
And maybe cut some of those overlapping roles.
Yes.
Okay, Tanya?
Yeah, so I would say sync outreach timing. So again, going back to alignment, once you have that alignment, then you can understand who's reaching out at a particular time. And that, goes into kind of creating from your communications this kind of single coordinated message rather than just this flood of noise that overwhelms employees.
From my perspective, make real-time reporting the norm. Align every vendor feed on IDs, cadence, SLAs. I think you all are catching on the pattern here now. So insights flow faster and decisions happen sooner.
Okay, so let's open it up to some questions. Thank you all for the questions that have been submitted. I'll start with a question I'm going to have Dave respond to. How do you balance thorough vendor due diligence with the limited time and capacity you have, especially with so many new solutions entering the market?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to be HR. I'm assuming that came from an HR person. I've never seen HR strapped as much as they are now. And I've been at this 20 plus years. So I would say lean on your broker consultants. There's a lot of vendors out there selling stuff that from a pop health perspective is not driving value. So your consultants should be the experts in digging into the data and bringing the strategy to you.
Anyone else have
Well,
thoughts?
if I can
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Paul. I just wanted to add from a data perspective, some key questions that, I ask is, what are the measurable outcomes being provided? How robust is the vendor's reporting and analytics? If a point solution can't really answer those questions, they wouldn't be a good fit for a client looking to unify their vendor ecosystem. Just my 2 cents.
Sure.
Okay, here's a question around engagement, just education, communication, marketing. Tanya, this is probably a good one for you. What are the most effective ways to educate, communicate, and market benefit programs so members actually understand and use the services available to them?
I mean, I think any good marketing CMO would tell you, it takes a number of times. It should be multimodal, and that is true. The thing that I would encourage people to think about is not just, the mode and number of times, right? Marketing works best when people are ready to hear the message. And so when a person, let's say, is activated, and I mentioned that earlier. And so we do, a lot of work, I think, around targeting, like learning who to target, right? And then we flood them with a number of messages, multimodal. I would also say contemplate when they're targeted. When is just as critical to, effective communication as how many times and the mode. So I think that sometimes that's completely lost. But when somebody is ready to hear a message, it's much more, it's received in a much greater fashion where someone's ready to act on it. Otherwise, it just oftentimes washes over someone as noise.
Yeah,
And
that
to
comes
add,
back to the point that Dizzy was just making, right?
yeah, just to add to that, to really bring that to life, you really need to have the right data infrastructure to serve those insights consistently to client leadership, and that really helps them develop and make real-time adjustments to marketing strategies and those elements that Tanya mentioned, tailored for each vendor.
Yeah, so daily insights, not monthly or quarterly reports or.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so Tanya, you mentioned politics a little bit earlier, I believe. How do you handle some of the overlap, and Dave too, how do you handle some of the overlap between solutions without getting caught in the politics? Because that's obviously not good for anybody.
Tanya, you want to go first? Or
No,
you want me to go first?
Dave.
Okay, yeah.
Because I think as a vendor, I'm going to have my own certain opinion. Right. I think as a consultant,
sure.
Yeah, I think you have a different one.
This is more and more of an issue, right? With consolidation happening and expanding of scope, it seems like so many of these vendors, it used to be, one condition that they managed, and now there's more and more expansion of what they cover and that sort of thing. I would just say, work with your consultants, but have tough conversations. I mean, we have to trim the overlap and not just maintain the paper that we have with all of our vendors. And in some instances, it's nice to have one paper with one vendor and cover a bunch of different conditions. But work with your consultants to really understand, are those conditions, is that vendor really going to drive? So all the things we talked about today, are they actually driving from a pop health perspective, the right outcomes that you want? So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Have tough conversations, trim the overlap.
That's a great place to leave it. And unfortunately, that's the end of our time together. I want to say thank you to the panel, Dave, Tanya, Aditya. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope that you're walking away with some practical ideas that you can actually use that will make your benefit ecosystem work as one and not just theory. We've got a QR code up. If you'd like to get some help getting started, you can scan that. We can send over a 90-day ROI readiness review. Comes with a simple checklist and some actions you can take with your own vendors to start lining up the data, tightening the coordination, and being prepared to prove results. If you'd like to help pressure testing your ecosystem, mapping vendors, aligning feeds, or building a shared scorecard, Wellnessity's here to help you. And we hope you reach out to the email demo@wellnessity.com. Thank you once again. I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Thanks all. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.